In this movie, we're going to scale, rotate, and position our figure. And we're also going to give her a natural cast shadow that we're going to draw by hand using the standard freeform lasso tool. All right, so I'll start by zooming in on my figure. And then make sure that the figure layer is selected here inside the Layers panel. And then go up to the Edit menu and choose the Free Transform command. Or you can press Control-T here on the PC or Command-T on the Mac. Now, I could go ahead and shift-drag one of the corner handles in order to scale her proportionally. But I already know the values I'm looking for. So I'll go ahead and turn on the link icon between the width and height values. And then I'll click on the W to select the width value, and I'll change it to 32%. And the height value will change in kind. I also think she's a little bit crooked, so I'm going to drag outside the transform boundary to rotate her a little bit in a clockwise direction. And in the end, I decided that the angle value right here should be 1.5 degrees. And I also happen to know a couple of positioning values. So I'll click on the X to select that first value and change it to 1574. And then I'll tab over to the Y value and change it to 1438. And then I'll press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac a couple of times in order to accept that change. Now I want to go ahead and turn her into a kind of silhouette. And because that requires darkening the figure, I'll go ahead and change the blend mode from normal to the foremost darkening mode, which is multiply. And we end up with this slightly different effect here. All right, now I'm going to draw a shadow just by selecting the standard lasso tool from the top of the lasso tool flyout menu. And now I'll go ahead and draw a shadow shape that's a little thicker in the middle. And I also want it to be half again as tall as she is. So I want it to go way out here like so that she's casting a super long shadow because the actual sun is pretty low in the horizon of this shot. And I want to nudge that shadow down a little bit. So I press the down arrow key in order to move it down a pixel. So anything's really going to do as long as it's a really long shadow with a thick middle. And if you think you want to add a little bit to it, you can just go ahead and shift drag like so. Entirely up to you how you work this. All right, now we want the shadow to be below the figure. So I'll click on that adjustment layer below the figure layer. And then I'm going to create a layer of solid color by going up to the layer menu, choosing new fill layer, and choosing the solid color command. And I'll go ahead and call this layer shadow because obviously that's what it is. And by default, you're probably going to see a black shadow. It's not really what we want. We want to get a little color going here. And if I zoom out, I can see some natural shadows in the landscape. And notice if you move your cursor outside the color picker dialog box, it changes into an eyedropper, which means you can then click on a color in order to lift its values. And in my case, I've lifted a hue value of 21 degrees, a saturation of 34, and a brightness of 40. But after noodling around a little bit, I raised the hue value to 30 degrees. I took the saturation value up to 50%, and I took the brightness value down to 25 in order to produce this shade of brown right here. And now I'll click OK to accept that change. Now, the other thing we need to do is soften the shadow a little bit. Notice that the natural shadows in the shot are pretty hard, but they do have a little bit of softness. And so to soften this shadow, I'm going to double click on its layer mask thumbnail, which looks to be entirely black, but it does have a little bit of white in it. And then I will change the feather value not to 1 pixel because that's way too much, but rather to 0.5 pixels like so. And then I'll go ahead and hide the properties panel. Finally, this is a shadow, which means it needs to naturally darken its background. And the blend mode for making one layer darken another, as well as creating shadows inside of Photoshop, is our dear old friend Multiply, which produces this effect here. All right, now I'm going to press Shift F in order to switch to the full screen mode. And I'll press Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac to center my zoom. And I'll go ahead and scroll up a little as well. And that is our final fantastic composition, thanks to the power of the most basic of the selection tools, which include the geometric marquee tools, the sometimes vexing edge-detecting quick selection tool, the luminosity-dependent magic wand, and last but not least, the 3 lasso tools here inside Photoshop.